Lastly, I need the diagonals. That's a little bit more hard-coded. So let's do top left to bottom right, diagonal. I'm basically going to just do these if statements manually. So I'm going to copy these and then pull out the for loop because I don't really have a for loop. So I'm going to say 0, 0. One, one. So if I play in the 1, 1, and then 2, 2. There we go. So it's basically doing those 3 checks, just not in the loop. And then I basically do the same thing as far as if I have a particular count, go ahead and do that. The last diagonal is from the top right to the bottom left diagonal. And this is the same sort of thing as this whole guy here. The main difference being that, I should think about resetting these. I'll get back to this in a sec. This will be 2, 0, 1, 1, and then 0, 2. So it's complaining here because I've already defined these variables up here. And in fact, now that I think about it, maybe what I want to do is go ahead and define them outside of everything. So I'll set all these to 0. And then within each of these, I'll just set them back to 0. So I don't use this create new space over and over again. Yes, yes. All right, so there we go. That's a lot of code for that. The next step is going to be, if none of those work, then I need to check for 2 x's in a row with a blank in between. So if it's basically the same idea as all of this. The basic difference is that you're going to be checking for x moves and just replace those. This sort of thing probably could be pulled into a separate method, and then you just say whether you're checking for O moves or X moves. In fact, let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to take AI move and make this a separate method. So check single blank, I guess. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass in an int, which is whether I'm checking for X's or O's. X or O. So that's probably not as good. Let's go ahead and say the player that I'm going to be checking on. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go through all of these things and replace O move with player. And then in here, I'll say check single blank with O move. So O move is going to replace player. And then rather than going through and trying to find all the O moves, I'm going to do a find and replace. So find and replace is a fantastic thing. So in the selected lines, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find O move, and I'm going to replace it with player. So in the selected lines, I'm going to replace all. Done. That was much faster and more consistent than having to go through each individual one. Now there's a little bit of an issue that if I try and do check single line, single blank with X move, which is the next thing I need to check, then I might make 2 moves in a row. Not so good. So what I probably need to do is actually return whether or not I made a move. So I'm going to return a Boolean instead. And instead of just returning, if I make a move, I'm going to return true. And if I get to the very bottom of this guy, I'm going to return false. So I'm going to say if that return true. It turns out you can put equals equals true or not. it amounts to the same thing. Since this evaluates to true, it considers that true or false. I'm just going to return if this thing gave me a move. Same idea here. And I no longer need that one. Now, if I haven't made a move yet, this is where I should play randomly. So that tries to win, try to block, and then play randomly. This is actually very similar to how we did Minesweeper, where we're going to make a list of the possible moves that are allowed, and then randomly pick one. So let's go ahead and do a pair of for loops. And do an array list of integers. List equals new array list integer. So capital I integer, of course, is the wrapper for int. This is going to be 3. This is going to be 3. I can use the tens place for the x and the ones place for the y. Speaking of which, y. So now I'm going to actually add it into the list. So if board x, y is a blank, list.add x times 10 plus y. And choice happens out here. That's going to be int math.random times list.size. That's the one we want. And then we're going to go ahead and make a play at that point. So board x, y is equal to list.get choice %10 to get the x. So actually, that goes in the x position. There we go. List.get choice divided by 10. I did that backwards, didn't I? %10 goes there. Divided by 10 goes there. There we go. So this is the, when you divide by 10, it gives you the x, the tens position. When you get the remainder after you divide by 10, that gives you the y. And that's going to be an O move. By the way, one other thing I've just realized is that I've been playing in the grid, the O move, but I haven't actually been updating the buttons. So everywhere I've had that, I'm going to need to make sure I update the button as well and disable it. So here, I'm going to need to do grid of these values dot set text to be an O, and then that same thing dot set enabled to false, so that I actually disable the button. Let's see, so down here when I actually play, this is going to be blank x and blank y for these guys. So play in the board, set the grid to that, set the grid to that. Same thing here, and the same thing for this diagonal, and the same thing for down here in this diagonal. All right, so that's all AI move. Let's go ahead and see how that goes. That was a lot of code, I know, and I haven't necessarily tested it. Shame, shame. So I play here, he plays randomly. Let's see if he'll block me here. He did. So I'm going to go up here, and he should play in the center to win. Oh, he didn't. He blocked me instead. That's kind of troubling. So it threw an error because we tried to grab an AI move and it didn't exist. Well, some debugging obviously is necessary. That gives you a start on it. I will get back to you in a moment with why that didn't quite work and what we need to do with checking wins and AI moves and all that.